Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming, and welcome to the online community. Um, it's really amazing to be up here. So I'm just feeling that right now. Thank you to Roshi for having faith in me and teaching, and thank you to everyone here, really, like the teachers, the residents, everyone. It's just been such an amazing community and place, the land, everything. And my kids are online, so hi. They had like labs and things. They couldn't make it up from Albuquerque. So, and I just keep thinking about when I received Jukai and Roshi said, we were talking about the kids and said, Dad got into something. So here I am. And thank you to my partner, Amy, who's right back there. Hi. Who's been just so amazing and supportive. So just wonderful. And I also have a sort of another thing. I just came from Houston, where I got scans all clear. And, as I was in the scanner, I was just thinking about how interconnected everything is. Like in this, like the thousands of people who designed scanners, figured out how to test them, did the studies, the technicians, just like everyone, just everything we encounter has just like this vast sea of people and effort and intention behind it. And so I was just so grateful as they put in something like technicium M99 or something like that into my body just amazing. So grateful for that. And also to acknowledge that today is the eve of Yom Kippur. And so just to take a moment there. So, way-seeking mind. When I've been putting together. I have to thank Sarakumal for she suffered through some early versions of the talk and helped me remove some things. So very good. But way-seeking mind, like when I think about it, it's like this idea of the way-seeking mind. It's like first thing I thought was like, do I have one of those? Like, is my mind really way-seeking? And sometimes I think I have a pizza-seeking mind or a Netflix-seeking mind. And what is it that is a way-seeking mind? Because I feel like, and a lot of sort of the arc here is going from being in the mind, in the intellect, in the conceptual, and moving into where I sort of am learning now to be in the heart. And so moving. So I kind of think about like way-seeking heart. Like how does that come about, and where did that come from? Um, so I have a quote from Walt Whitman here. So as I think about my journey, it said, and this is a quote that says, "Not I, not anyone else can travel that road for you. You must travel it by yourself. It is not far. It is within reach. Perhaps you have been on it since you were born and did not know. Perhaps it is everywhere, on water and land." And that's, as I look back, I really feel that this path was hidden for a long time from me. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, um, in a very kind of, my dad was an engineer, but he was also a mathematician, and he was very logical. Like logic was the driving force. I can remember driving in the car and getting sort of quizzed on critical thinking and logic and how, just constantly analyzing things. And my hero growing up was Mr. Spock from Star Trek. I also have big ears, so that fit. Um, so there was this like intellectual feel in my family, and I was good at school, and that was a big identity. But there was this other kind of valence that was coming through, and that was Catholicism. And it was like a contradiction. Like here, we're very intellectual, and then we still do this kind of Catholic thing, and the unseen and the mystical there, and the saints and all these stories and all that. So like it's kind of a seed was planted there. Like maybe there's something beyond that. Um, of course, there was some good Catholic guilt in there. I went to a parish school. There were 18 kids in my grade. Like we were this cohort from kindergarten that just went through. So it was kind of, I was kind of lonely a lot. And I'd spend a lot of time in the creek behind my house. There was this beautiful creek. And that was just kind of the place I would go. And I have a quote here from Annie Dillard about creeks. Um, it has always been a happy thought to me that the creek runs on all night, new every minute, whether I wish it or know it or care, as a closed book on a shelf continues to whisper to itself its own inexhaustible tale. It is a good reminder that the world is not dependent on my understanding. I cannot cause the creek to flow or the trees to leaf, but I can behold them. The walking itself is the point. The walking the creek is my home. If I seek the creek, I find myself already within its rhythms, its newness. If I walk the path, I find myself walked. If I walk the path, I find myself walked. The act of attention is the journey. The reward is not the place we think we are going, but the very motion of being alive, of finding ourselves at all in a moving world. And so there was this kind of seed that was planted when I was little. I remember one day I went to the creek and went to this area that I didn't usually go to because it was really brambly and there's kind of a bluff. And I was there just exploring. I'm always looking for crawfish and water striders and minnows. And I saw down off the bottom of the bluff, kind of a pretty steep jump, like something that looked like a fossil, and I wanted it. And I didn't want to go through the brambles because I'd tear up my clothes, and there's that fossil. And so I was going to jump down. And I was like mustering up the courage. And so I was like, 1, 2, 3, no, don't jump. 1, 2, 3, no. And then 1, 2, jump. Like I had to surprise myself. And I jumped down, didn't sprain my ankle, found the fossil, and looked up, and the way the sun was behind the tree, like backlit, the adrenaline, it was just one of those moments where I can remember this so distinctly of feeling this sense of connection, this sense of just interconnectivity with the tree, with nature, with everything. And that kind of sat in my head, like, okay, what was that? I didn't have a lot of context to figure that out. And then I also hadn't thought about how I get out of that spot. So I had to go through the brambles, tear up my clothes. And luckily my mom's a seamstress and was able to fix them. But I was still in that intellectual world, and then kind of moving into high school, I kind of rebelled a little bit against engineering. My rebellion was to read, transcendentalism. So I'd read Thoreau and Emerson, and then I encountered Peter Matheson, who's part of this tradition, and starting to see some Zen, and as so many of us, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and found that book and started counting my breath, sitting a little bit, exploring that. But I was still in this, kind of had this Catholic overview and all of that. And so my senior year, there was this class I didn't want to take at school. It was called Christian Living. And in this class, you had to pretend you were married to another student and do like the budget thing and all of that. And you had to have an egg, and you had to keep the egg alive for like a week, and you couldn't leave the egg in your locker. Like there were egg inspections, and I wanted nothing to do with this. So I convinced the school to let me take a religion class at the University of Dayton, which was a Catholic school. And they said, yes, that would be okay. I could substitute the class. And then being 17 and a 17-year-old, I signed up for a class on Buddhism. So, and what was amazing about that class wasn't the content and all that, but it was the fact that it was taught by a nun, and she introduced herself as a Zen Catholic. And all of a sudden, that kind of blew my mind. Like, okay, there's this way of exploring the tradition of, like, somehow that's okay. Like, it kind of gave me permission to start exploring. And then, so that was high school, moving into college. One of an event that was also planted some seeds was the Dalai Lama came to visit my school. And my roommates and I, we were like groupies. They were giving out tickets, and like the front row tickets they'd give out first. We camped out We camped out outside for like 4 or 5 hours, and we got front row tickets for the Dalai Lama, and it's so true. Like His Holiness, like the sense of presence you hear is like we were just feeling that presence. And I remember distinctly. I don't remember what the content was, but I remember distinctly he was speaking in Tibetan. He had a translator, and then he'd say something, the translator talk, and then they'd have a discussion in Tibetan, and then he'd say something else, the translator, and then eventually he just like dismissed the translator completely, continued the talk in this super charming English, and this idea of like, the directness of that. Like it was just wonderful. And something, it just keeps coming back to me, like something was planted there. 2 years into college, I hadn't figured out what my major was. I met with my advisor, and he's looking at my transcript, and he says, "Well, you've taken a lot of religious studies classes. How about that?" So I ended up doing that, so I was a religious studies major. After college, I got this job in Wisconsin running an after-school program. I'd spent my summers there as a camp counselor, and it's just still kind of in that lost sort of searching mode. So I filled out the Peace Corps application. And in the application, there's a section where it's like, preference, like where do you want to go? And it has like different regions. And I just marked no preference. I hadn't really thought about it. So I get the letter back, they accepted me, and I think they figured out that, okay, here's this guy, he's living in Wisconsin, he understands layers, we'll send him to Mongolia. He can handle the cold. And it turned out, just an amazing point in my life, like to the trip to, going to Mongolia. I ended up there for 3 years. And as I think about it, there were four lessons there. And the first was not knowing. So in Mongolia, this is the mid 90s. For example, you'd get in a Jeep with a friend, and you're going to go to, visit his brother or something at the river, and you really cannot know what is going to happen. So you're driving, and someone flags you down, and they're like, "Oh, can you bring this to someone else on the way?" And then you drive some more, and someone gives you a kid to deliver. You drive some more, and you've got a sheep on your lap. Like every day was like that. You couldn't approach it with, "This is what I need to have happen. This is the outcome I need." You just had to flow. And there's a saying, if you're ever in a Jeep with a Mongolian driver, you never ask, "How much longer is it?" You can ask, "How much further is it?" Because they can tell you that, but they cannot tell you how much longer it is, because you have no idea what could happen. So that was one. So this kind of, I did learn, as a young 20-something-year-old, like just not knowing and just accepting what was coming. I also got to witness interdependence, especially in the countryside. No one can survive alone. You have these yurts, and just the family, the way everyone worked the animals, and like just a good example of that. There's this fermented mare's milk is one of the drinks, and as people come in and out all summer, everyone's churning. Every time you come in and out of the yurt, you're churning the mare's milk. It's a collective process, and it gets down to -40 in the winter, and you have to rely on hospitality. If you stop at a yurt, a ger, you'll be fed, no questions asked. You have to be accepted in. So just seeing that, how for thousands of years people just depended on each other. I also experienced Buddhism in a emergent way. So during communism in the 50s, Mongolia unfortunately had their own kind of Stalin, Choibalsan, and there was a purge of the monasteries, a purge of the monks. That was fairly awful. And in the 90s, and they kept a couple monasteries as kind of museums. And there's just oppression of Mongolian Buddhism, which is very similar to Tibetan Buddhism. And this was as it opened back up, like people were re-exploring Buddhism and pulling things out from that they had hidden, and bringing out the prayer wheels, and it was just, for me, it was a really, like I was able to go in and see that. And also at the place I was working was a medical college, and it was a mix of traditional Western medicine and Mongolian medicine. And that's where I kind of met the medicine Buddha for the first time, and really pulling in that imagery, this sort of blue lapis Buddha. It was not only there to heal illnesses, but also to heal the three poisons of greed, delusion, and hatred. And that was really like they were pulling that out. They were re-engaging with that. So I was able to experience that. And at one point we went to this one monastery. It was like deep in the countryside called Amarbaisagalantid. And it survived. And it survived because I think no one could find it. It was so remote. And one of my friends and I, we managed to get a Jeep and we went there. And it was just this beautiful sense of place, just the energy of it. It was just amazing. And just to experience that coming in. And one kind of funny thing there is it was strange. So in Mongolia, dogs are usually kind of guard dogs. They're not really pets. But at the monastery, there are all these stray dogs, and they were being fed and really taken care of. And I asked, that's what's going on there. And they said they believe that the monks that were kind of not so following the rules, not so good, are reincarnated as monastery dogs. So Jaya is it explains something for Jaya, but yeah, they're reincarnated as monastery dogs. And the last thing I learned that really influenced a lot of the next years of my life was the physicians there were extremely well trained. Like originally I thought, okay, here's the system if we want to improve healthcare, we need to, people need more education, more training. But the Russians actually did a good job, and the physicians were all trained in Moscow, had great knowledge, and they had no medicine. And they had, if a patient was admitted to the hospital, they had to procure their own medicine, often procure their own, if they needed a vitals machine, if they needed a diagnostics, it was like it was on the family to find that for them. It was on the family to bring food to the patients in the hospital. And it just opened my eyes really to systems and how systems affect everything. And it's not about an individual, it's not about expertise. And that led me to, grad school and in public health. So I went to Hopkins. I applied. So when I was applying for my sister, this is still in Mongolia, and like just another funny thing is like everything we printed, I didn't know this for a while, everything we printed at the school, it came out in brown ink. I thought that was a weird choice until I saw the secretary one day recharging an ink cartridge. So it was like the ribbon ink, those old ribbon printers. And how should they recharge it? She would dip her hands in motor oil and then stretch it on the ink and then crank it and then stretch it. And that's how we would recharge it. So I printed out my Hopkins application. It was in this brown ink, and then I was filling it out, and we had a power outage, and I spilled wax on it. And I think those things are what got me in. But I started at Hopkins and just like ate that up, like medical anthropology, health and human rights, all of this. Came back to Mongolia for different projects. But I also, while I was there, I met Julie, who became my wife. And we were friends at first. And she was working in Russia. She had founded this organization to address HIV. And yeah, so she was just amazing. She's just this fierce presence, just really beautiful, really so smart. And she had founded this Russian non-governmental organization in like 1992. It was like one of the very first organizations there. And, I started working with her, and we were really working with, the most vulnerable groups out there. So commercial sex workers, injection drug users, trying to prevent, the HIV. It was just, there was very little knowledge. We had this we had a newsletter we would write, which was basically kind of a sex education newsletter that I later heard from a person here who was in high school at the time. It was like gold. They would get it. Like they had no information and they would get our newsletter and read it. We had a condom brand. We were doing everything we could to start shifting and protecting and do harm reduction. And it was up against a lot, with the Russian government and how things were. So that time was just so amazing. Like we were working on um, these large organizations, getting funding and working with these populations. And also during that time, we decided to have a family. So we had twins. Hi. And that was really wonderful. So we had this like kind of moment of these big, expansive projects and this little sweet, tiny family. And it was really beautiful. And as things developed, we sort of saw what was happening in Russia, and we made a shift from HIV to HAIs, which are hospital-acquired infections. We found this technology. It's basically a germ zapping robot to um, disinfect hospital rooms. And so we founded a company. And the mission of the company, which we're still holding, and I'm very proud of, is to reduce the sufferings and deaths caused by hospital-acquired infections. That was what we were trying to do. And I was, got very caught up in that. You have investors and patents and sales teams, and you're just building that out. And meanwhile, we have our family. And during this time, kind of rolling back a little bit, Julia was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And it was challenging. Like she had a lot of fatigue, especially in we were in Houston at the time, in the hot Houston summers. And we kind of discovered Santa Fe by accident. A friend got married here, and she felt good here. So we started coming more and more. My kids played in the park right across there. They played on the tire swing that has now fallen down. Um, so it was like a circle. It felt like we were circling around Upaya, but didn't know, never crossed the threshold yet for me. So this was all really like there was this sort of just kind of loveliness. We were slowly moving to Santa Fe, and then the next big lesson was impermanence. We have a new house. We bought this, years ago. We buy this land we really couldn't afford. Then we built this house we really couldn't afford, and we finally moved in. And that summer, the first sort of sign of things was Julia was kind of she'd go for hiking. She'd hike behind the house and really enjoyed that, but would get lost. Just kind of a spaciness. Just it was kind of strange, and we kind of made a joke out of it. Kind of city girl, kind of thing. And I remember I'd go down the trail and I was yellow yarn, and I'd mark the trail with the yellow yarn for her to find it. And then school was going to start. The kids were going to start a new school, and we decided to go for a hike in the Jemez Mountains. We went from, if you're familiar, we went the long way to San Antonio Hot Springs via Battleship Rock. And on that hike, about halfway to the hot springs, she started limping, like a distinct limp. And we're thinking, okay, this is a MS relapse. We've had years without one. We'll deal with it. She had just had an MRI about 3 months before. We finished the hike. We found a neurologist. Well, we had a neurologist, which was great. I think there's one in New Mexico. It's a challenge, and she got put on steroids, high dose Solumedrol, and felt better. Like felt the side effects of that, but felt better. I had to go, turns out, to Japan for a business trip for a week. My mom, thank you, Mom, came out to be with the kids, talking to Julie on the phone. She's getting headaches. I came back and it just kind of took one look at her, and we went to the ER. And we were there for about 14 hours. They couldn't figure out what was going on. She was in just so much pain, and nothing would touch it. And they're about to discharge us. They just didn't have anything for us. They finally got the pain under control by a combination of medications. And the ER doc said, this just doesn't feel right, and ordered a CT scan. And I can still remember the picture he showed me afterwards of the CT, and you see the brain, the hemispheres, and just large tumor. And turned out she had a glioblastoma, a brain cancer. And it just kind of obviously was shocking, especially she had an MRI just like 4 or 5 months before. And so we're in this medical journey. She had brain surgery. We went to Houston for the surgery. I remember the kids counting their staples in her head. She had 54 staples. Surgery went well, as much as it can. But one thing that was like really striking for me during this time was like, I was lucky. I didn't have to travel. I didn't leave her side, and she wasn't afraid, and she wasn't angry, and she kind of guided me through it, and we ended up just connecting in this just amazing, just deep way that I had never experienced before. Just this, there was this, for me, it was like an opening up. Um, um, she actually asked me to, she made a number of requests for me, and one of them was to change my name. So Tuck is not my real name, but it is now. And I realize now there's like just this wisdom in that, because it allowed me to take a new name and to be a new person. After about 6 months or so, she fell, she stopped talking. We went to the hospital, and she was just for 3 weeks in this like restless, active, altered state, and was never there. I have to think she was already gone. And so that was, there were 3 of us then. The kids, we're all dealing with this in our way, and I was maintaining functionality for the house for them, but I can remember just this churn of anger and sadness and guilt. I remember getting the kids ready for school, dropping them off, and on the way back having to pull over and just scream or cry and go into my day. And somewhere in this, which was really good, I remembered meditation. I remembered practice. I remember the different seeds that were planted. And I started to sit again. So sometime after that, I read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. And it happened I was going on a business trip to Amsterdam. And so I signed up for a retreat, a psilocybin retreat. And in that retreat, I remember I was holding my wedding ring, and I saw Julie. And then she kind of like shifted or changed into the medicine Buddha that I'd encountered in Mongolia. And I think that's maybe when I finally kind of got the message that here's this path for me. And so I started practicing on my own. I eventually literally crossed the river because my house is on the other side, and began sitting at Upaya, the noon sit. You come in and sit and face the wall and leave, and it was perfect. It was silent. I didn't have to talk to anyone, but I could come and I could sit. And I remember what really struck me. I did a few Sazenkais, and I remember being really struck by the night chant. So, let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly and opportunity is lost. Let us awaken, take heed. Do not squander your life. Just, and then letting that just settle into the night, the Zendo is it's really beautiful. So I was working into that. And then there was this pandemic thing happened. So I was online then. Thank you, Kodo. Like I listened to everything. Like it was amazing. I would go from Zoom calls with hospitals and infection control and going to listening to program here. And really balance things out. Um, and as coming out of pandemic, I got a taste of more impermanence. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, really aggressive, fast prostate cancer. My score went like that, went straight up. I ended up having treatment back at MD Anderson where Julie had treatment. I had to go into the same rooms, the same MRI waiting room. We created this. I used to be, I was on faculty at MD Anderson at one point. We created this protocol, a little bit of a custom protocol that would just, one thing you have to do is just I had to drop my testosterone to 0 for 2 years. But there was like this kind of light dark to that. So on one hand, there's challenges with energy, challenges with, kind of your physicality. But the other thing I experienced during that time was this just depth of connection. And my zazen was really amazingly deep. I could I would cry at movies. I was just like, I was in touch with this emotionality I'd never experienced before. And in some ways, I am really grateful for that because it really showed me, okay, there's this other energy here. There's this other way of being. And when I finally got off treatment and the testosterone came back, it was challenging for a while. It's the frustration hormone. It really, it was just, it took me a while to rebalance because you couldn't really see that. But I got this vision of this depth and beauty. And then I also, during the time, I unexpectedly fell in love again. And this sort of spaciousness began to open. Pandemic was ending. My kids were moving out, moving on to college, and doing their next phase in life really beautifully. And so I had some openings there, and decided that I really wanted to not go backwards and especially after the testosterone thing and not go into this habit energy of intellectual and so I signed on for chaplaincy training and that is just been so amazing. I'm in the middle of it now and learning to serve and show up in a different way than in the sort of policy way I was doing before. And just I'm beginning to realize, and it's still budding, is it's about presence. It's about being present with people. I'll go and lead maybe a meditation at the shelter, and if I'm well practiced, if I can show up present, something really beautiful happens. Just we go really still and really deep. And the same thing we do, sometimes we teach meditation at the prison, and same thing, like if I can, and I can't always do it, I'm not always there, but if I'm well practiced, if I can show up and really settle in and create this space, it's not about me teaching something or giving something. It's just creating this really just a moment of beauty. And so this is what I'm learning now as I go through this. I took, well, before chaplaincy, I did Jukai, and I got the name Butsumon, which means Buddha Gate. And and Roshi said during that time of many people will find the way through you. And I like that sort of calling of like, how can I create a space or create a place for people to just to be themselves, to let go of all the defenses we have to put up. Oh, that's not even the last page. My pages are out of order. Here we go. And so now I'm in chaplaincy now, and I'm also in postulancy. And really a lot of the reason I want to do that is I want to really connect my identity with this practice. I know that my habit energy is really strong. I know that my conceptual mind will take over, and I don't want to find 5 years from now that I've kind of let it go. And so by ordaining and taking a deep, deep commitment and really identifying with the practice, that's what I want to hold on to that. And so one last thing I want to leave you all with this, and this is a poem, and I'll read it twice because that's what. And this was a poem Julie gave to me. It's an E. E. Cummings poem, and for me, it's a poem about non-dualism. It's a poem about deep connection, interconnectedness, and like an interpersonal space. It's a poem about how I want to show up, or I can't do the little parentheses, so there's parentheses in it. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I'm never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here's the deepest secret nobody knows. Here's the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than the soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. One more time. I carry your heart. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear, and whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. And here's the deepest secret nobody knows. Here's the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than the soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. Thank you.